How many protests in America can you think of that Republican leaning groups have engaged in? I can only think of two. I know there's been a few more, but not many. The Democrats, with all their power, corrupt power, have labeled one of those protests as an insurrection. The other protest they labeled was from Charlottesville. They labeled it as racist. And it was actually a protest of not knocking down our history, to remember history, not knocking down the statues. And so there was one racist group that went there, but most of them were not about, they were mostly non-racist groups there. There was one there though. And that's the only two I can think of. But how many protests have the Democrats had? Thousands. When you include the Black Lives Matter protest, which really, they didn't help Black lives, by the way. They hurt them, right? Because they weren't really, that's not what it was about. It was a trick. So it took police out of drug cartel neighborhoods that hurt black folks. That's what it did. And those cartels, those are slave organizations. That's slavery, right? You might not think so because we make it all look hip in the music industry and stuff. We make it look sexy. We, not me, but they make it look sexy. They make it look like a guy is taking care of all these beautiful women, right? But that's not what it is. It's a whole different story out there. It's people who love money and they'll hurt people over money. They love power. They'll hurt people over power. And they're paranoid. They can go to jail for the stuff they do when they should have legal venues of medicine. Okay, but how many protests have Democrats had? They've had thousands. And one of them is specifically racist and Nazi. They always falsify who's Nazi, but what is a real Nazi? A Nazi was Adolf Hitler, who hated and killed the Jews. He mass genocide. He killed Jews. And so you got the Palestinians here protesting Jews and hating Jews. That's a Nazi related type thing. And so then they have wars in the Middle East between usually with the Nazi types hating the Jews, trying to start wars, and Israel keeps trying to keep the peace. And they have to fight to keep the peace because they have to defend themselves, right? And so they've brought those wars, they're trying to bring those wars over here. That's what the Democrats are doing. So I'm just wanting to point out that look how hypocritical the Democrat Party is and how much power they have when they lie about who's Nazi, and they're supporting the Nazis. When they lie about protests being something they aren't, and they've tried to put people in prison over it, and tried to ruin the whole presidential election and everything over an insurrection that, according to Trump, which I agree with this, Nancy Pelosi was in charge of security the day that they had the supposed insurrection, which was just a protest. And all the stuff they said that happened there didn't happen, the bad stuff. Some bad stuff did. And some bad stuff happens at all the protests, all the Democrat protests. Well, it's very hypocritical. They have too much power. They pretend to be against monopolies and capitalism, but the Democrats have made a monopoly and capitalist thing out of media, so they're able to tell these lies and trick people. And then they do fact checks and all this kind of stuff. And I just redid this video because I accidentally said they brought wars from Europe. It's close to Europe, but the Middle East is where they brought the wars from. They're trying to bring wars. They're bringing racist protests, and they're promoting Nazism through the Palestinian protests at the colleges and all that. And so those people are racist. And so one thing the Democrats do, real racism is, by the way, evolution. And evolution is completely disproved by, I'm not even allowed to say that. They call that hate speech, but I can prove my point. It's real. Evolution shows we came from different races. We're unequally. The Bible shows we're all one human race from God, Adam, and Eve. And these guys, they'll say that whale bones in the Sahara Desert were found from tens of millions of years ago. And that is completely untrue. They completely skipped the flood of Noah, which is where obviously some whale bones in the Sahara Desert would have come from. And the reason they do that is because it disqualifies evolution. The flood of Noah disqualifies evolution, and it shows we're one human race from Noah's family after the flood. And that's not very long ago. And so, you got to look at what's honest and quit just buying into their hate. They promote hate so much, and they falsely call people racist that are not racist. You got to look at the real definition of racism. You got to look at the protests and uh, see if the protests are for a real cause and things like that. And everything the Democrats are doing are trying to put people in jail. They're trying to, like, for no good reasons. We need jails to keep people safe, things like that, and keep people's properties protected. And just because you have jail, we shouldn't over punish people. That's stealing too. There's a lot that can be done. But I want to keep this somewhat short because it's having trouble uploading. But pay attention and understand we're one human race from God, Adam, and Eve. We got ethnicity when God changed language. All right? That's pretty obvious if you look at it. God changed language at the Tower of Babel. Everybody moved according to different parts of the earth according to language. And your skin, if you live near the equator for a couple thousand years, you need more vitamin D to protect your skin. And so the fruits, the scientific evidence of that is that they had fruits in those regions that create more vitamin D. Obviously, the sun does too. And so your skin darkens. It's not a big deal. It's not really a big deal. I mean, your DNA builds that. It grows into the DNA. Or genes. I don't know. I don't know specifics on that. But over time, so you get a strong DNA for having more melanin in your skin from vitamin D, I would think. But anyway, that might not be the perfect explanation of why we have different tones of skin: Asians, whites, Europeans, blacks, and Indians, and Hispanics. And why is my skin a different color than my own siblings? It's not a big deal. All right. Adios.